Going live on Facebook now, and we are recording, so. Ready when you are, Mr. Chair.
Ready when I am, okay. Yes, tonight our job is to review the budget and the special articles, if I got that message right, Nicole?
That is correct.
Okay, and at that time when we're done reviewing, Nicole is going to lead us through a different than what it usually is process tonight. We're going to kind of a little bit shook up here because something happened with my joining meeting. So anyway, just to clear, I want to make sure everybody that's on the budget committee is with us tonight. I see that we have Rob Lambert, Ron McIntyre, Bob Hanson, Andy Sliver. Who else? I guess that's it so far.
Carl Mabzino, Jim Long. Let's see, who else can I see?
I guess that's it.
And Rich Clark.
Oh, Rich, yep.
Oh, there he is, the owner.
Bob Hanson is there.
Yep.
Okay, and Bob Lambert.
And I'll let more people in as they join.
Okay, so as we, I guess as we get going, Nicole, I guess it's up to you. And when we finish hearing your review, we'll be appearing for answers. And then at that time, we're going to take each individual article by itself, and I'm going to poll the budget committee. In other words, I will be asking if you vote A or nay after a motion is made to accept and seconded. And that will be the procedure. We'll go through all of the different members of the budget committee. Are there any questions about this so far? Okay, Nicole, I guess it's yours to give us the rundown on the budget and the different special articles.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the process as I see it tonight, I'll go through a PowerPoint. It's many slides just to get through our operating budget, but I want to make sure we go over it in some detail. At the conclusion of that presentation, we'll take questions first from the Budget Committee and the Select Board. As you can see, we have the department directors here. We have Town Clerk Linda Guyette, Fashfar Shahi, our IT Director, Seth McLean, our Director of Public Works, Scott Gennard, our our Police Chief, Danica Malone, our Town Planner, Lorraine Panopoulos, our Town Librarian, Library Director, Lisa Betts, our Recreation Director, Fire Chief Ed Walker, Finance Director Leo Smith is with us as well. And in the background, hiding from view, we have Shannon Kelly, who also works in our Finance Department, Ali Kreutz, who's taking our minutes, and Tim Brezovic, who is running the IT that I am not currently running. Doing a little bit of juggling here. So as we go, as I said, we'll go through this PowerPoint presentation just on the operating budget. Once that's complete, we'll take questions first from the Budget Committee and the Select Board. Then we'll take some questions from the public, if there are any, on Facebook or also by email. Anyone who wants to email their questions, they can do so to administration@peterborough.nh.gov. We'll then go one by one through the other warrant articles that have money attached to them. We do have a handful of those proposed warrant articles. We'll take them one at a time. At the end of each of those warrant articles, we'll be asking first the Budget Committee and then the Select Board to make votes as to whether or not they recommend those articles. Those votes will need to be done by roll call vote. So we'll be first calling off your name and asking if you vote in favor of the article or in favor of recommending the article or not. That way we can be sure that Ally is able to capture the correct number of votes for and against recommending the articles. When you do go to ask questions, if you could please use the raise hand button that you find at the bottom of your screen. As you just saw me stumbling through, talking about announcing everyone who's with us. There's a lot of people on my screen right now, so it's a little hard to read through all of them. But if you press the raise hand button, your name will be moved to the top of the list and I'll be able to call on you. Okay. And without further ado. All right, so here is our presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2022 operating budget. This is just a very quick summary of the operating budget. This is essentially the very highest of helicopter views. You'll see that we are asking for very little increase this year. I'm really so very, very pleased with the hard work that our directors put in this year, keeping this budget request as low as possible. Our operating budget is only up 0.9% over the prior fiscal year. That includes our debt service and our capital improvement efforts. When you add in the overlaying tax credits again, the amount that we're asking to be raised in taxation is only up $58,538 over the prior year. And this is where I'll start going through the highlights. Our salaries reflect increases of cost of living adjustment and merit for a combined 3.2% over the prior year. That's a financial impact of $109,000. Our health insurance premiums will be going up 2.7%. That's a financial impact of $38,846. Now, the significant impact on effective July 1st, will be the New Hampshire retirement system rates increasing. Police will go up 17.6%. That will have an impact of $52,884. The other employees, full-time employees, impact will be going up 6.4% with a financial impact of $15,339. And fire departments, the fire chief, who is the only firefighter that we pay into on a pension, is 11.2% increase with a financial impact of $2,108. The total financial impact there of the changes in the New Hampshire retirement system rates is $70,331. In general government, our proposed expenditures will have decreased from fiscal year 2021 by about $300,000. It's down 8.4%. There's a lot of ups and downs here, so follow along if you can. We have a reduction of staff in office community development. Our personnel costs went down $74,000. We bought our permitting software, so we no longer need to raise and appropriate that money. That's $38,000 that we do not need that we had raised last year and do not need in the upcoming year. We have a reduction in personnel-related costs in other general government that total altogether $156,800. And reduction in staff in buildings and grounds that saves us $58,000. A reduction in other departments of $29,000. There is an increase in IT operations. We moved some of the costs out of office community, or planning community development into IT, so that goes up $31,000. And some other miscellaneous department expenses to the tune of about $31,500. Our proposed revenues have decreased from their current fiscal year 21 budget by $307,000. That's a 12.7% decrease. Primarily, you'll see this in the reduction in the interest income that we receive on our invested cash. That's $103,000 that we will not be realizing this year. And anyone can tell you right now, interest rates are just incredibly low across the board. There's also a little bit of a reduction in property taxes, interest and penalties, $25,000. This is not a bad thing. That means that people are paying their property taxes on time. There is the loss of the municipal aid from the state of New Hampshire. That was a 2-year only benefit from the state, a little bit of restoration of what had been previously revenue sharing. It's $89,000 for 2 years. This is our last year. Reduction other fund transfers to the general fund of $61,000. A reduction of building permit fees and tip transfers of $26,000. A lot of that had to do with sidewalks. And a reduction in upper hall rentals of $9,000. That is just estimates because we're assuming that we're probably not going to be quite back up to fully functioning in the upper hall due to the ongoing COVID pandemic. In public safety, our proposed fiscal year 2022 expenditures have increased by $185,000, or 7.5%. A lot of that is in police department, $132,000, and a lot of that is the retirement that I've already addressed. There is an additional increase in salary-related costs of $52,000, including staff development of $15,000, training of $12,000. And there are some miscellaneous reductions in expenses that totaled to the tune of $15,000. We also had a decrease in emergency management expenditures of $2,476, which of course had the outsized impact on such a small budget of being down 12.4%. This is mostly related to emergency management administration. In highway and streets, the proposed expenditures decreased from FY21 by $583,894, or down 26.9%. Again, most of that is staff related. Those costs have dropped significantly, $44,000, but also reduction in highway administration, $12,000, and buildings and grounds reduction of $7,000. Vehicle costs also came down, and we have the CIP items, and of course we made those purchases this year, so they're not showing up in the budget in the proposed year. We also have a reduction in what we're asking for West Peterborough TIF. Again, that project is going to be completed this year, and it's not anticipated to go on to be ongoing in next year. And so you'll also see a reduction in the offsetting revenue. Contracted services did go up $30,000, and there's an increase to the street lighting budget of $26,000. That's when we move, when the Route 101, Route 202 bridge is rebuilt. We'll need to replace the street lights that are attached to that bridge for the pedestrian underpass. There's also a reduction, again, that reduction in transfers from the West Peterborough TIF that I talked about. We have a reduction in reimbursement for plowing at Depot Square, and a reduction in the highway block grant. This is because the highway block grant is based on the amount of gasoline tax the state receives. Gas tax was down, receipts were down this year, and so what they're sharing out to municipalities is also down. Sanitation, our proposed FY20 expenditures, we have an increase from the FY21 expenditures by $5,000. Much of this has to do with post-closure at Scott Mitchell Road, increased costs from geo and in-situ desert groundwater monitoring. But this budget is level funded with revenues offset from New Hampshire ball bearing and our trust fund. There's also a slight increase in administration costs and operating costs, and a little bit also in their buildings and grounds, vehicle maintenance, and hazardous waste days. That's the money that we pay to the city of Keene so that they will host hazardous waste take back. And of course, our recycling revenues have also decreased, primarily which is primarily related to reduction in the transfers from the Reclamation Trust. Human services, our proposed FY22 expenditures have increased, mostly driven by salaries and related costs. In culture and recreation, the expenditures have decreased by $22,000. Much of that is a decrease in library costs. That's related to capital outlay. There is also revenue offset that also reduced. There is a small reduction in administration operating costs, as well as a reduction in their building and grounds cost of $12,000, and a reduction in Kai Sage house costs. In parks, the expenditures are, more or less level funded. Patriotic purposes is exactly the same as last year. Conservation Commission, down a little bit, but really that's only a couple $100. And expenditures in the Heritage Commission is level funded. As far as revenues are concerned, revenues are down. There's a decrease in library revenues related, again, to those trust fund revenues and other miscellaneous revenues, generally from rentals. In recreation, we're anticipating an increase in rec revenues of $24,000. Most of that is from that the reimbursement from the Albert Noon Fund for the Peterborough Community Center building assessment. And we've talked about that at length. We can certainly discuss that further if we need to. Decrease in rental revenues. Not surprising. Again, COVID has really done a number on many of our rentals and pool registrations. And a decrease in revenues from rental of the parks. I'm sorry. Excuse me, decrease in estimated costs of park maintenance and related reimbursements from the West Peter Road TIF. Thank you. Debt service. Our debt service is, of course, up as we expected as we started loading our debt. However, our existing general obligation bonds decreased by $6,656. My understanding is that was a very successful refinancing of the bonds by New Hampshire Bond Bank. We have our new debt loaded, which is Main Street Bridge, the townhouse renovation, and the library. We're anticipating loading transcript dam and the DPW facility as well. And our revenues are increased, our proposed FY22 revenues are increased from the 21 budget by $204,000. That's using the Main Street Bridge and Library Expendable Trust funds, which we had set up last year at town meeting. Pay as you throw, this is of course, these additional funds are the revolving funds, pay as you throw. We have a proposed increase of expenditures, so those of course are to meet the additional costs of disposal and hauling. That is of course 100% funded by the sale of the pay as you throw trash bags. Water also proposed to increase. The special articles, excuse me, much of that is attributed to the water main relocation project at Route 101 Bridge, and also the funding for the Coldstone Springs Engineering Services. And there's other incidental increases in operating costs of $56,000. Water meters also, we're looking at $22,000 in the supply line. And the capital outlay has decreased $17,000 related to not purchasing a vehicle. The debt service has increased $84,000. Again, that's Coldstone Springs. And then, of course, the revenues have also increased to meet those expenditures. Wastewater proposed FY22 expenditures have decreased. Reduction is in administration and operations, as well as buildings and grounds and vehicle costs. There is an increased capital outlay of $57,000, primarily related to the Vector truck. That's and $75,000. You'll find that in CIP. The total cost is $75,000, which you'll see in the CIP. There's also a reduction in transfer general fund of $63,000. That's related to healthcare costs. Leo and Jen did a review of those actual costs and found that we were not budgeting those correctly. Also a reduction in operations revenue. This is again related to the FY21 budget being overstated, an increase in utility billings, and a reduction of interest income. There's also a reduction in the solar system revenue, that's the solar array at the wastewater treatment plant. The lower rates from Eversource for electricity have a direct impact on that. And in the ambulance revolving fund, our proposed FY22 expenditures have increased from the FY21 budget by $16,000. The fund includes the ambulance 911 and transfer businesses. Since the fund is a break-even model, the proposed FY22 revenue matches the expenditures in terms of overall increase. The financial expectations of the fund is to plan revenues at the FY19 levels. We expect that we will be returning to that level of service. And in fact, we've already seen that recovery. The revenue implications of COVID-19 and FY20 were catastrophic, which of course we will be getting into a bit more in depth later. The revenue decreased from the FY19 by approximately $223,000 as a loss of 13.2%. The ability to reduce operating expenses, primarily staffing costs, is very difficult based on the level of full-time staff. Staffing levels are 73% of the total operating expense of the ambulance revolving fund and the ambulance service. So at the end, that brings us to Article 2, which is our budget for the fiscal year 2022. $15,817,741 is the total gross cost of the proposed budget. That's before revenues. Of course, everything we've talked about has been expenditures plus offsetting revenues. Excuse me. So when you see a net number of $7 million, that's why you see such a dramatic difference.
Is this where we begin voting?
That is certainly where you can begin asking questions.
Okay. Any questions? Do we have any questions from the Budget Committee? Waiting. Everything seems pretty straightforward on that. Any questions from the public then? About the selectmen, do they have any questions?
Tyler?
Hi, Nicole, you mentioned several departments where there were reductions in expenses for employees. Does this mean we've lost people, they've retired? Are we eliminating positions? Will they be coming back? What is happening?
Yep. We have had a number of retirements. Ronnie Bartlett, who, though you saw him earlier today, he is now a part-time employee. Ron Du Bois and Dave Cromie and a number of other employees of Public Works also retired this year. We've had a few retirements in the police department over the last year or so. All that has really added up to a reduction in staffing costs across the board. We've also done some changes just in reorganization where we had, for instance, we had Pete and Kristen in the Office of Community Development. We reorganized those, they were both full-time positions. We reorganized those duties a bit. Danica's a full-time position, but Karen's is a part-time position. So that also has some additional reductions in staffing costs associated with it.
Very good. Any other questions? And with the Budget Committee, I will hear a motion to approve.
Oh, Carl's got a question.
Carl, your question?
Yes, I'm sorry, I couldn't find that raise hand function, so it took me a little while to sign in. So I eventually found it. Your presentation was labeled operational funds, but in fact we're voting on all funds, right? So the commentary should be on everything, is that right?
The operating budget, which includes all of our funds. So the general fund, the water fund, the wastewater fund, the ambulance fund, pay as you throw.
I'm referring to the CIP projects. Are those going to be listed here as well?
Some of the CIP projects are included in this article, and some of them are split out separately. So we have two articles on the warrant, but most of the items are either rolled up into this or they'll be in the next article that will ask you to recommend or not recommend.
So it's everything except what's in a separate warrant article.
That is correct.
Well, I can't find that button in the raise hand thing on my screen.
I hear you, Bob.
Huh?
I hear you.
You know what, I don't have a question, but I don't have that raise hand thing on my screen. I don't know where to look for it.
Okay.
Just raise your regular hand, that'll work.
There you go. There you go. We can do that, bro. Thank you.
Okay.
You'll have to get your participants, you go down to where on the bottom of the screen where it says participants, you click that, and on the bottom of that screen on the right, there's a little thing that says raise hand.
Raise hand. Yep.
Okay, any other questions? I'm ready to hear a motion to adopt the general budget. Could you put a number up, Nicole, that tells us what that bottom line on that budget is again?
Yeah, let me show you two things. So first, this will show you everything. So if you have all the warrant, or subtotal of the operating budget, we're asking you for a net net of $6,877,843. In gross terms, however, this is what you're actually going to see when you go to vote. It's $15,817,741.
Does everybody understand that? Or does anybody not understand that, I should say?
I know it's confusing.
I'm not hearing any questions. I would like to hear a motion to accept the budget as presented.
I'll make that.
So
motion,
moved.
Roland.
You'll make a motion to accept the budget as, and I need a second from the budget committee.
Second?
So moved by Robert Lambert, second by Carl Mazzino.
Okay, I'm going to proceed now to ask each one to vote and say either yea or nay, or A and A. Bob Hanson. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye, sorry, I was muted.
Okay. Ron McIntyre.
Yay?
Mandy Sliver.
Yay.
Don Parkhurst. Is Don with us tonight?
I haven't seen him.
Okay, apparently. Richard Clark.
Yes.
Carl Mazzino.
Yes.
Jim Long.
Yes.
Robert Lambert.
Yay.
And I vote yay. We're on to the next
Select board?
board, right.
Hey, Nicole,
Yes, Leo.
just to kind of get back to Carl's question in terms of the breakdown of the budget. You know, as we were going through the budget, we had that general fund budget worksheet where we had all the analysis of last year's budget to this year's budget. But we also had a tab in there for the enterprise fund. So if you look at the $15,817,741, $10,716,703 is for the general fund, and the enterprise fund is $5,101,038. So that adds up to the $15,817,741.
Thank you, Leo.
Just to get some clarification on that.
Thank you, Leo.
You're welcome.
Back to you, Nicole.
Thank you. And we
Select
get
board
this.
roll call.
Yes, please.
Bill Taylor.
Yay.
Ed Youngst.
Yes.
And I'm Tyler Ward, yay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Article 3, capital reserve and expendable trust funds for $163,100. This is where we will be asking the voters to raise and appropriate tax funds to go into various expendable and capital reserve trust funds. So we have $15,000 to be placed in the GIS Capital Reserve Fund, $18,100 to be placed in the Police Department Fleet Management Capital Reserve Fund, $40,000 for the Fire Department Apparatus and Equipment Capital Reserve Fund, $10,000 to be placed in the Winter Operations Expendable Trust Fund, and $80,000 to be placed in the Fleet Management Capital Reserve Fund. Does the Budget Committee have any questions on this?
I'm hearing no questions. I'm going to assume that we'll proceed to vote.
Roland?
Yes. Oh,
I'm just looking, I looked at the wrong figure, I figured it out, thank you.
I need a motion to approve Article 3, capital expendable trust funds for $163,100.
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Bob Hanson, yes. Second.
Okay, and who moved the original? Do we know?
Ron
McIntyre.
Ron McIntyre, okay. To the vote. Bob Hanson, how do you vote?
Yay.
Ron McIntyre, how do you vote?
Yay.
Mandy Sliver, how do you vote? Don Parkhurst is not here still. Richard Clark,
Yes.
Carl Mazzino,
I'm sorry, I noticed here that it says 73,000 in words and 83,000 in numbers.
Oh, thank you, I'll correct that.
So which one are we voting on?
One.
We're voting on the total
The
number,
83
which
is
The 83 is the correct number?
The 83 is the correct, I'm
That's
sorry,
right.
100, it's 163,100.
Right, composed of 83,000 in the first one. And I vote yea.
okay. Jim Long,
Yay.
Bob Lambert,
Yay.
and I vote yay.
And Select Board, Bill Taylor,
Yes.
Ed Youngst,
Yes.
and an aye for Tyler Ward. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next is our regular housekeeping article, transfer from cemetery trust fund for $3,000. Said transfer amount from the cemetery trustees checking account to the cemetery expendable trust fund, which is 100% funded by the sale of deeds and burial plots.
I make a motion, we accept it.
We have nobody asking a question, I believe, so I'll accept that as a motion. Bob? Do I have a second?
Second?
Second, we proceed to vote then. Bob Hanson? How do
Yes.
you vote? Ron McIntyre, how do you vote?
Yes. Yes.
Andy Sliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Richard Clark?
Yes.
Carl Manzino, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jim Long, how do you vote?
Yes.
Robert Lambert, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
And for the Select Board, Bill Taylor,
Yes.
Ed Youngst,
Yes.
and an aye for Tyler Ward.
Next one is the roadway systems upgrade capital reserve fund for $400,000. Again, to see if the town will raise an appropriate sum of $400,000 to be placed in the previously established roadway systems upgrade capital reserve fund.
So moved.
I might say this is one of the most beneficial articles that we have that we need to vote on. I've looked at the condition of the roads has improved so much in the last couple of years that we've done this. It just seems to me we need to continue if we possibly can afford it. We'll take questions from the Budget Committee. Hearing no questions, I'll look for an article. A motion to approve the $400,000.
Motion to approve.
And do I have a second?
Second?
A motion and a second. Bob Hanson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ron McIntyre, how do you vote?
Yes.
Andy Sliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Richard Clark, how do you vote?
Yes.
Carl Manzino, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jim Long, how do you vote?
Yes.
Robert Lambert, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes also.
And for the Select Board, Bill Taylor,
Yes.
Ed Youngst,
Yes.
and an aye from Tyler Ward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Ambulance revolving fund, $400,000. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $400,000 to be placed in the previously established ambulance revolving fund. The sum to come from unassigned fund balance, no amount to be raised from taxation. We discussed this at length at our last meeting. This is to help the ambulance service, which unfortunately suffered at the end of fiscal year 19, beginning of fiscal year 20 due to the COVID pandemic. A surprising and entirely unexpected effect of the COVID-19 pandemic was that our ambulance calls for service dropped dramatically, virtually overnight, particularly while we were in shutdown and no one was going to work. Many people were afraid to call the ambulance and go to the hospital. And as the ambulance service is 100% or nearly 100% funded by user fees, that had a really dramatic impact on the ambulance service, which unfortunately had just purchased an ambulance for cash leaving its fund balance in a particularly vulnerable place. What we are looking to do is to take funds, unexpended tax funds that have been raised and appropriated. This is from the general fund. This is money that either is from expenditures that we didn't make, whether things cost us less or we had overestimated on an item, what have you, or more revenues collected than were anticipated through the budget process. We fully expect that we will be able to take $400,000 out of the general fund balance and transfer it to the ambulance service to get them back into the black, get them back into a comfortable place where they're going to be able to meet their expenses going forward, and continue to not only meet their expenses but also meet their regular day-to-day cash flow. The ambulance service fees have more or less recovered, and we believe that they're going to be able to meet their needs based on their calls for the fees that they receive for calls for service. But this is just essentially a one-time infusion of cash to help them get that fund balance back up to a place where they'll be able to draw on it as they need. Are there any questions about this? Chief Walker and Leo Smith are both here and can certainly answer in more detail than I can.
Yes, I have a question.
Ronnie?
You actually answered my first question. So the money is coming from what we call the general fund. I'd like to know how much money is actually in the general fund at this moment. And the second question I have is, will that money be returned to the general fund at any point?
Leo, do you have that estimate right in front of you?
Yes, I do. I would say, as of we speak today, the unassigned fund balance is $3,478,938. That's presently where it is right now. Obviously, we're going to get a plus from the budget surplus that Nicole talked about $495,000 in the general fund. So you look at that, you look at those two numbers, then we feel comfortable that we can take the money out of the unassigned fund balance to help support the ambulance revolving fund.
And my second question was, will there be any kind of return of that money to the general fund, or is this I don't want to call it a gift, but is this just a one-time transfer of funds from general fund to the ambulance revolving fund?
I think to be conservative, we should look at this as being a one-time transfer and not expect there to be a return to the general fund. Is it possible? Yes. I mean, certainly the ambulance service pays some of what we're talking about for expenditures the ambulance service needs to make are transfers into the general fund. For instance, the general fund pays for the health insurance for all of the full-time staff for the paramedics, full-time paramedics and EMTs. And then is reimbursed by the ambulance service for that. So some of that money would be coming back. It's very complicated, a bit of accounting that happens every year between the two funds. So yes, in a sense, you could say that some of the money will be returned, but really ultimately it's probably better to think of this more as a one-time transfer from one fund to the other.
Thank you.
If I'm not mistaken, I recall that we purchased an ambulance prior to knowing what the funds were going to be returned to us for the year 2020. Is that correct, Nicole?
Yes.
So
yeah.
in basic terms, this is replacing that $400,000 by legally voting this into so that the money is actually at one time was taxed money that was made into the fund balance that we have. I'm surprised that we have that many $1 million hanging around in our fund balance, but I see this is not a real problem because basically it's a shift in funds from the fund balance that we would have to, by law, vote on, and to pay for that ambulance. Am I wrong in assuming it that, to be that way?
So we already bought the ambulance is already purchased.
Yes, yes.
And that's why the fund balance, the ambulance services fund balance was as low as it was. Part of the reason why it was at a fairly low point. It wasn't zero. The ambulance service certainly was not broke going into the beginning of 2020. But it was at a little bit of a low point because of that purchase. It had stretched the fund balance a bit. And then came COVID, and that took a real whack to the revenues. The expenditures are what they are. As I said earlier, very briefly, 76% of the expenditures in the ambulance service go to staffing. If you don't have the staff, your ambulance can't get out the door. And that's, we put it in very simple terms. So the money still had to be spent to keep the staff available to be on the ambulance to answer those calls. And so the money was still going out, even though the revenues were not coming in. So to back up a little bit though, and to talk a bit about the general fund, yes, we do have over $3 million in the general fund. We're required to keep a certain amount in the general fund because the town has to be able to pay not only its own bills, but also has to be able to make payments to the school district and to the state. Remember that we collect all the taxes on behalf of those other governmental organizations, not just our own. And so we have to make sure that we have enough cash in our fund to make those monthly payments to the school district, for instance, to the county, to the state, even when we're still anticipating our tax bills coming in. So that's part of the reason why the fund balance needs to stay at that $3 million or so level.
Paul?
Yes, Leo, yep. I know I missed something in there.
Oh, no, just getting back to the ambulance fund, we had at our last budget meeting, we kind of went through kind of the progression of the fund balance for the ambulance, and at the end of FY19, it actually had a positive fund balance of about $574,000. But with the combination of the COVID, the reduction in revenues, and the purchase of the ambulance, it took that $574,000 and turned it into a negative $656 fund balance. So looking at that, we know at the end of FY20 we had a negative fund balance of $83,000. We're projecting this year that the ambulance fund will lose $316,868. So if you take that number plus the negative fund balance at the end of FY20, adds up to the $399,216, which points directly to the $400,000.
Thank you, Leo. Are there any other questions on Article 6?
Bob Lambert?
What is the amount we have to keep in the general fund?
That changes from year to year. It's based, like I said, on our own budget, our warrant articles. It's based on our share of the school bill. It's based on our share of state and county taxes. So that's a moving target. There's a percentage that we aim at, a minimum percentage of retained fund balance for each year's appropriations of about 8%. But again, that's all those appropriations, not just the town's appropriations. So it's really hard for me to tell you exactly what it needs to be from year to year because there's so many moving parts that go into that equation.
It's pretty much mandated by the state, though, as I recall.
It absolutely is. They tell us what we have to have, and we go from there.
Bob, in terms of last year, at the end of FY20, our retention percentage is what they call it, which is the amount of cash divided by all of these various general operating expenses covering general government, the school, the county, et cetera, was 12.05%, which was on the better than 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great. That's
Good.
right where you want to be. It's not too much, it's not too little.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lee.
Okay, any other questions? I'm ready to hear a motion to accept Article number 6 for $400,000.
I so move.
Okay, that's the second.
Second?
Moved and
I
seconded.
seconded it, I didn't do the first part.
Okay. Bob, how do you vote? Bob Hanson?
Unmuting. I'm in favor. Aye.
Yes, aye. Ron McIntyre?
Aye.
Andy Schleifer?
Aye.
Richard Clark?
Yes.
Carl Mabzino?
Yes,
Jim Lowen?
Yes.
Robert Lambert?
Yes.
And myself, I vote yes.
And John Parkhurst has joined.
John, how do you vote? Don Parkhurst, are you with us? Got your hand up. Go ahead, Don.
Trying to figure out how to unmute this thing, yes.
There you go.
Did you hear the previous discussion?
Yes,
And are you voting yes on the Article 6?
yes.
Okay, then we're unanimous.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
And the select board, Bill Taylor,
Yes.
Ed Youngst,
Yes.
and an aye from Tyler Ward. Thank you.
All right. Article 7, broadband build-out, $262,288. This is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $262,288 for the purpose of extending Consolidated Communication Incorporated's broadband service to every residence in Peterborough. This cost will be recovered over time by the town through an additional service charge paid by the Consolidated Communications Incorporated broadband customers. So this is a new one for the Budget Committee and still a relatively new and shiny one for the Select Board. We had a RFI, RFP process that we went through, anticipating that we would have to bond any broadband build-out. We received 2 responses, one from Consolidated Communications and one from Comcast. And we were shocked and very pleasantly surprised to find that Consolidated Communications build-out plan not only reached every single home and would begin its work essentially the moment that we had a contract signed with them, but that the total ask was $262,288, substantially less than what we would ever consider bonding for. It's really remarkable. Their proposed build-out includes fiber to every home in Peterborough. Essentially, they're going to follow the telephone lines that are already existing on the pole. And in fact, as they've been upgrading their entire network to fiber, a lot of the work in Peterborough has already been done. So really what they're looking for here is support for the last mile work. They're anticipating charging the users no more than $8.50 a month. They believe it'll probably be less than that to be able to return the funds back to the town of Peterborough. Of course, there's a lot that we will need to work out through a contract, but it looks very good. The other towns that have gone this way with Consolidated, Chesterfield being the first town, but of course we've also, almost all of our neighboring towns working with Consolidated right now have been very, very happy with the process and the product that they're getting. So the team, myself, Karen Hatcher, who really led this process, and Bill Taylor, who's been working incredibly hard on this for the last couple of years, were very enthusiastic to recommend this to the Select Board. The Select Board agreed and accepted it and agreed to put this on the warrant, and so we are here asking the Budget Committee for their support. Any questions?
Bob, you have a question?
I have a question, Nicole. I watched the selectmen's meeting this evening, and it was very interesting. And my wife wants to know why we can't get TV through them, because you can go to Consolidated, but Comcast isn't going to knock your bill down. You take your landline off, and your bill is still going to be high.
Right. I'm not sure if they have any, I don't think that they have any contracts for TV services.
They do. If you go online, my wife saw they do
Yeah.
have TV.
Yeah. So what they're offering, what I expect that they would be offering then is some kind of a bundled service, with a DirecTV or, probably not Hulu since they're partially owned by Comcast, maybe YouTube, something along those lines. where you would be able to get your television over the fiber connection.
Really good to know because
Yeah.
Comcast won't drop your bill and they keep going up and it's ridiculous the amount of money you spend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bob. Anybody else have a question on this?
Yes, I have a question that would certainly sweeten the deal for me.
Mhm.
And Nicole, I know you talked about this at the select board meeting, but what are the upload speeds that Consolidated will be offering, and what are the associated costs?
Yep. There are 3 tiers of service levels that they're proposing. They are symmetrical services, so the lowest tier is 50 megabytes down, 50 megabytes up. The second tier is 250 down, 250 up, and the third tier is 1 gig down, 1 gig up. The least expensive of those is $43.50 a month. The most expensive of those, 1 gig down, 1 gig up, is $78.50 a month, which is, I know, it's quite remarkable.
Okay, I'm ready to vote.
Get TV in there.
Okay.
Do I have a
Any
motion?
other?
Wait a minute, do I have another question?
One question on Facebook, asking if there's a guaranteed upload download speed. I don't know if that's guaranteed to the same level that you would have as a business customer, but that is what their aim is, 1 gig down, 1 gig up. I need to have their contract be able to tell you if that's absolutely guaranteed, but that's certainly what the average of the service would be. And Bill, you have a question?
No, I just have a comment because Consolidated had said that what their original offering will be gig speeds up and download, but within a year or two, I think he said, that would be going to 2 and then eventually to 5 and then on to 10.
As maximums, yes. That is their plan.
I have a
Tyler?
question.
Sorry, Ronnie, yep.
In this package, will residents be required to buy or rent a special modem from Consolidated? Is that part of the deal?
I don't know. I don't have that level of detail yet. That will be coming. We needed to get to the selectmen's meeting tonight and get their approval for us to move forward with negotiating with them before I could get all that information.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Tyler, you have a hand up?
Yes, so Mike, I forgot to ask at the select board's meeting, this 262, 288, do we have that? Do we have a contract stating that if we put this to town meeting and get an affirmative vote, then they'll stick to that number?
That was their proposal. Their proposal is the basis of the contract that we will be entering into with them.
Not only that, but the second they get that money, they start working. Like within a week.
Wow. Wow.
Sounds good.
Your house first, Ronnie.
Yeah, he's first right after mine.
Yeah, maybe Bill's first, sorry.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? Any questions from anybody else at all? Okay, I'd look for a motion to approve Article 7.
So moved.
Seconded?
Second?
Okay, Bob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ron McIntyre?
Yes. Yes.
Mandy Sliver?
Yes.
Don Parkhurst?
Yes.
Rich Clark?
Yes.
Carl Manzino?
Yes?
Jim Long?
Yes.
Robin Lambert?
Yes.
And I, Roland Patton, vote yes too.
And for the select board, Bill Taylor,
Yes.
Ed Youngst,
Yes.
and a yes from Tyler Ward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicole, what's next?
This is it. Now here's our final look at what we're proposing for this year. So again, our operating budget is up a total of $58,538 after you take all expenditures and revenues together and net them out. That is a net change of 0.9% over the prior year. When you add in our overlay tax credits and all of our warrant articles, we are looking at an increase, or I'm sorry, we are down. This is, Leo, is this the old slide? This is the old slide.
Yes, the only thing that's really missing is the
200.
The warrant article has 260, when we put it in at 262, it's really 262, 288.
My apologies, I am so sorry and so embarrassed I didn't update that slide. We'll get to the right one.
Yeah, the warrant article is off by 228.
It is off by exactly that, yeah.
Exactly.
So,
So the right number is 825, 388.
thank you.
Yeah.
So we're not seeing that.
No, and I can't get it up, and I'm not sure why. So, my apologies.
So you have nothing else for us, and I call.
And nothing else, that was the last of the warrant articles.
Call this a meeting. Well, we did very good. A little less than an hour. We go through all of that. Anyone else got anything they want to say before we close it?
Yes, please.
Carl.
I just want to make two comments. One is that the staff of the town did do an amazing job of keeping things down despite the difficult year we had last year. And certainly Leo did an exceptional job in responding to our general requests that we made along the way. Which leads me to make some general requests for next year. Virtually all of which we've already seen in the budget committee, but I'd like to reiterate them at least for the budget committee so that people can comment if they wish. First of all, there were 3 recommendations that came from the CIP, and I think they were in principle endorsed by the budget committee, but they have an effect on next year's budget. If the responsibilities of the rec department and the DPW shift, they will change, of course, how the budget is structured. So it will be difficult to look at either one of those budgets without reflecting what responsibilities have also shifted. We also talked about charging Conval for use of tennis courts and the reserve fund for tennis and basketball maintenance. Again, affecting the budget as it's written for next year. It doesn't affect the dollars, but it changes the way the budget's done. Secondly, we have seen a couple of other areas in which the budget did make shifts between lines. In particular, we saw that with salaries. And Leo was good enough to clarify all of that, and it turned out that it didn't make a big difference, but we couldn't tell how big a difference it made until that was all clarified. So I would hope that next year we can see, whenever responsibilities are shifted from one line item to another, that that's reflected clearly in the overall budget so that we can see how one year compares to the previous year in unfair terms. And then lastly, we were going to raise this, but I see it came up already tonight. The accounting of the general fund, of the unassigned fund balance, would be good if next year we could see estimates on what we think the state requirements would be and what funds went into that general fund from what it would be from this year. So those are the comments I have about the process, which was done very well, but now that we've seen what Leo can do, I think we can make further requests from him. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Nicole, I think we're ready to call for an adjournment.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. It's been a lot of work this year, and I know that this was pretty unusual circumstances, doing everything over Zoom. But I really appreciate you all working with us and sticking through our challenges this time around.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you.